British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will host Ukrainian President Zelensky at Downing Street in just a few hours' time.
In a surprise move, the European Union is stepping in to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, as the meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and United States President Donald Trump in the Oval Office was tense.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position.
The European Union is taking responsibility to ensure that hopes for peace are not dashed.
European leaders about their own strategy toward ending Russia's war against Ukraine. All leaders who Zelensky...
The European Union and the United Kingdom immediately called for an emergency summit and started negotiations with the Ukrainian leader on a number of issues. The United Kingdom is particularly prominent in this regard. The summit in the United Kingdom will be attended by the Ukrainian leader and more than a dozen leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Turkey, NATO, and many European countries. After meeting with Trump, Zelensky postponed all post-meeting activities in the United States and traveled directly to the United Kingdom. United Kingdom Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer gave Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky an incredibly warm welcome. The two posed positively for the press and expressed the European Union's concern about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. After the summit, decisions were taken that would worry Russia and dropped a bombshell on the global stage. The UK and France will work with Ukraine to draw up a ceasefire plan to be presented to the US, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said on Sunday. Starmer said he was working with France and Ukraine on the plan to end the war and that the group of mostly European leaders had agreed on 4 issues.
UK, France and others will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting. Then we'll discuss that plan with the United States and take it forward together.
Here is Starmer's 4-step plan for peace. Keep aid flowing to Kiev and maintain economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine's hand. Ensure that Ukraine is at the bargaining table and that any peace guarantees Ukraine's sovereignty and security. Continue to arm Ukraine to deter future invasions. And lastly, he said they would build a coalition of volunteers to defend Ukraine and guarantee peace. Starmer claimed that the United States under Donald Trump was still a reliable ally, implying that he had spoken to the U.S. president about his plans. He said before the summit that he did not trust Russian President Vladimir Putin, but trusted Trump. Starmer also confirmed plans to form a coalition of the willing to enforce a possible peace deal in Ukraine, saying the UK was ready to support with troops on the ground and aircraft in the air. French President Emmanuel Macron said he and Keir Starmer had proposed a 1-month ceasefire in the air, at sea, and on energy infrastructure to buy more time to de-escalate Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Macron acknowledged that a full ceasefire would be very difficult to achieve given the length of the front line, saying a limited ceasefire was needed. In the interview, Macron suggested that the deployment of European troops on the ground would take place later, not in the coming weeks, after the two sides negotiate the details of the agreement. We want peace, but we don't want it at any price, without any guarantees, he said. Macron also said that EU fiscal rules should be relaxed to allow countries to spend more, and that innovative financing should be used to finance defense spending. Reacting to today's summit in London, Friedrich Merz, who is expected to become Germany's next chancellor, thanked British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron for their efforts to bring a lasting and just peace to Ukraine. Your efforts to build bridges across the Atlantic are very important. We must remain united in our goal of ending Russia's war of aggression, he said. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte pointed to plans by some NATO countries to increase defense spending, urged the media to stop gossiping about what the U.S. will or will not do, and stressed the country's continued commitment to NATO. The developments before the summit were also very critical. So what did Ukraine get before the summit, and what measures against Russia were on the agenda? What are the UK and France providing to strengthen Ukraine? Just before the summit, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's announcement of a massive loan of around £2.26 billion to Ukraine and the United Kingdom's readiness to include frozen Russian assets in the package caused an international outcry. The London government is offering Ukraine approximately $2.8 billion, about £2.26 billion, aid package by creating a financing mechanism backed by frozen Russian assets. In addition to this financial support, the Starmer administration has opened the door to military and arms support. In particular, the idea of sending British Typhoon fighter jets to Ukraine and more than 10,000 peacekeepers to Ukraine has been rumored for months, and there have been strong signals in recent days that this possibility is getting serious. Moreover, European Union leaders' messages of support for Zelensky were as warm as the United Kingdom's approach. Friedrich Merz, who is expected to be Germany's next chancellor, said that they stand by Ukraine in times of trial and never confuse aggressor and victim. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock accused Trump of reversing the roles of victim and aggressor in the conflict, saying his actions mark the beginning of a new era of disgrace. French President Emmanuel Macron told reporters that Russia is the aggressor in the war in Ukraine, while Ukrainians are the attacked people. It was also mentioned that Emmanuel Macron stated that Russia must be stopped urgently and demanded that the European Union take joint steps in the peace process. The reactions of both Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Polish President Andrzej Duda against Russia's possible invasion, steps towards Europe and the United States taking a separate position from the European Union on the peace process were also discussed. In addition, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's message, "Dear fellow Ukrainians, you are not alone," was also on the agenda while Zelensky was in the United Kingdom. Zelensky and Starmer also focused on how Ukraine can come out on the advantageous side of the peace negotiations. Sir Keir Starmer has repeatedly stated that France could also support Ukraine in this regard. The Paris government was suggesting that Ukraine could have a mining agreement with France instead of the United States, and that Russia should continue to be targeted with sanctions. At the same time, the French suggested that they agreed with the British on a joint peace treaty. The United Kingdom Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, announced a massive summit to address all these European Union concerns, how the war could be brought to a peace process, and how the differences between the United States and the European Union on this issue should be resolved. Sir Keir Starmer announced that he will present a peace plan to United States President Donald Trump after the summit of European leaders, which is scheduled to take place in London on Sunday, March 2. In an interview, Sir Keir said that his recent discussions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Mr. Trump had led to an agreement that the United Kingdom would work with Paris and possibly one or two other countries to work with Kiev to draw up a plan to stop the fighting.
Macron and President Trump on the phone, we've now agreed that the United Kingdom, along with France and possibly one or two others, will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting.
Mr. Starmer added that the plan would then be discussed with the United States. But the most important detail Mr. Starmer announced ahead of the summit was the new step of support for Ukraine. We will now discuss the contents of the support package for Ukraine that Mr. Starmer announced ahead of this summit in the United Kingdom, and the full details of the peace plan that the United Kingdom will present to the United States. We will also look at Russia's efforts to approach the United States on this issue. The European Union wing has sent a clear message to Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin with the United Kingdom summit and the United Kingdom's latest support move for Ukraine. Before this summit, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom drew even more attention to himself and announced a historic package of support for Ukraine. On March 1, the United Kingdom signed an agreement with Kiev to provide Ukraine with a loan of £2.26 billion, or $2.84 billion, backed by frozen Russian assets. The loan, under the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Loan Initiative, was signed during a visit by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to London for talks with United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Ukraine's finance minister, Serhiy Marchenko, said in a statement that the United Kingdom continues to defend Ukraine, and this agreement is a very important proof that the United Kingdom is contributing to strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities. The loan will be used to purchase defense equipment that meets Ukraine's needs, the finance ministry said. In October 2024, the G7 countries reached an agreement committing to provide Ukraine with a loan of about $50 billion.
The United States and G7 are now making good on that commitment. Together, we will leverage income earned from frozen Russian sovereign assets to provide a total of $50 billion of...
The United States will cover the bulk of the loan with $20 billion in aid. The United States is closely followed by the countries of the European Union, including France, Germany, and Italy, with a total aid of $19.4 billion. The remaining approximately $10 billion will be split with Canada, providing $3.7 billion, Japan $3.07 billion, and the United Kingdom $2.8 billion in loan financing. Ukraine has already received $1 billion from the United States and $3.1 billion from the European Union as part of the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Initiative. While Western countries have frozen $300 billion of Russian assets, they have access to the annual income generated by these funds, about $3.2 billion. These profits would support a $50 billion loan to Kiev, but most of the assets are frozen in European countries. Now, with the announcement by United Kingdom Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer of a massive aid package from frozen Russian assets, the balance looks set to shift again. In January, Zelensky and Starmer signed a 100-year partnership agreement during their meeting in Kiev on January 16. The comprehensive agreement covered cooperation in the military, energy, scientific, cultural, economic, and other sectors. The loan provided by the current United Kingdom and the Ukrainian leader's visit to London was particularly noteworthy as it followed a heated exchange between Mr. Zelensky and United States President Donald Trump at the White House on February 28. As we mentioned, Mr. Starmer's announcement before the summit attracted even more attention. Earlier in the day, he reiterated his country's support for Ukraine and Zelensky, in line with its European allies. Sir Keir Starmer also told reporters at a press conference with Zelensky that his country will continue to stand by Ukraine. The summit concludes a busy week of diplomacy for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is increasing United Kingdom defense spending and has traveled to Washington, D.C. for productive talks with President Trump to bolster United Kingdom and European security. The Prime Minister met again with both President Trump and President Zelensky on Friday evening, following the events of the President's meeting in Washington, D.C. Sir Keir Starmer welcomes Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni to Downing Street on the day of the summit, and is then joined at the summit in central London by the leaders of Ukraine, France, Germany, Denmark, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Spain, Canada, Finland, Sweden, the Czech Republic, and Romania. Mr. Starmer has been clear that there can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine, a commitment he reiterated on Saturday evening when he warmly welcomed President Zelensky to Downing Street ahead of the summit. Sir Keir Starmer also stressed the need for the European Union as a whole to be ready for possible Russian aggression in the event of a peace scenario. Following the announcement earlier this week that the United Kingdom will spend 2.5% of its gross domestic product on defense by 2027, the Prime Minister will be clear that Europe must play its part on defense and take steps for collective security, Mr. Starmer said. In addition to defense spending, the United Kingdom has previously made it clear that it is ready to support Ukraine's future security with boots on the ground. Sir Keir Starmer has stated that 3 years after Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, they are at a crossroads and suggested that they will do everything in their power to stop this war. Presumably, the United Kingdom's strategy included sending troops. Plans by the United Kingdom and other European countries to send troops to Ukraine are still in the very early stages. But United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer is already thinking about how such a move might play out at home. Sending United Kingdom troops abroad, even for a peacekeeping mission, always has the potential to trigger a huge public debate. The United Kingdom government is considering deploying military forces for the first time in 11 years, after the Cameron government discussed intervention in Syria with the United States Obama administration in 2014. Since then, the United Kingdom has not seriously considered deploying troops overseas. The British Army has said it is ready to deploy to Ukraine at the government's request. There is talk of an army of around 20,000 to 30,000 troops. The United Kingdom military wing was activated before the end of February to prepare for the deployment. Some 2,500 soldiers from the 1st Division, the United Kingdom's Army's High Readiness Force, took part in a major NATO exercise at a training ground in Romania, just 25 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Although the use of cell phones was banned during the exercise, the majority of the soldiers knew that initial discussions were taking place about sending troops to Ukraine. Brigadier Andy Watson, who commanded the British contribution to the NATO exercise, said his brigade was fully prepared if ordered to deploy to Ukraine. Keir Starmer said earlier this week that he was ready and willing to send British troops to Ukraine to guarantee its security in the event of a ceasefire. However, he is not yet clear on what might be required of them. Brigadier Watson said that it would be up to the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Defense to decide what the force package would look like in terms of the number of troops that might be needed. But he stressed that this is certainly not something the United Kingdom can do on its own. Of course, the United Kingdom has the power to do it. Already, as part of NATO's new Allied Reaction Force, the United Kingdom has demonstrated that it can move large numbers of troops and equipment, including more than 700 military vehicles, 2,253 kilometers across Europe at relatively short notice. But the peacekeeping mission requires 100,000 troops. Therefore, in addition to the United Kingdom, it seems that other European Union member states should also make efforts in this regard. French leader Emmanuel Macron has always been on the agenda as one of the most prominent supporters of sending troops to Ukraine. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot emphasized that they did not rule out any option. The French armed forces, especially within the military, have become increasingly bold about the role that the country's military personnel could play in Ukraine, especially after the end of hostilities. This joint move from France and the United Kingdom was also supported by the new United States President, Donald Trump. Donald Trump has promised to end the war in Ukraine, and the outlines of his plan are starting to emerge. The United States leader probably took into account Russia's military cooperation with North Korea and considered it wrong that tens of thousands of North Korean troops, which Pyongyang put at Putin's disposal, participated in the fighting in Kursk and on other fronts. Likewise, the United Kingdom and France were opposed to North Korean troops fighting for Russia against Ukraine. The additional NATO troops that the United Kingdom and France could create a security bubble over a significant part of Ukraine that is not occupied by Russia. According to analysts, this would significantly strengthen Ukraine's chances of ending the war on its own terms, and such a presence would inevitably be necessary for stabilization once the conflict ends. The only way to convince Russian President Vladimir Putin that Ukraine's sovereignty and independence are no longer vulnerable to his revisionist hegemonic ambitions is seen as a concrete security guarantee, evidenced by a military presence on the ground.
Welcome. If you like the content I produce in this channel, please like, comment, and share. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more news on geopolitics.